One of the best ways that I communicate with the team is I do have some standard templates and stuff for notes and sessions and things like that. But also I'm flexible enough to, depending on who the treatment team is and what information they want and how they want it, my standard forms can actually be tailored to whatever way that the treatment team would like to receive the information. Some really want very detailed notes and want to know what you're going over with the 8 keys and things like that. And others just want a quick email to say, hey, we did X, Y, and Z to kind of meet this goal this week. So really, I think the communication is about flexibility and giving the team what they want in the format that they want it.
Now, in terms of tips for working with your client's treatment team, it's really essential that they understand the role of a coach from the beginning. Coaching is a relatively new field within the eating disorder space. And so we have to be really mindful of being really respectful when we enter into engaging with multidisciplinary team that exists with our clients. We need to explain the role of a coach, articulate it really, really clearly so that they're aware that we're not here to stand on any toes. We're an absolute adjunct to the team and we're there to help them to help the client. And we're all working towards those common goals that are set by them as a treatment team. So you don't want them to feel threatened in any way. Just obviously respect, integrity, and them fully understanding what your role is for the client and how it can actually assist them as a team, because you will be able to be there in ways that they are unable to be just because of the nature of their roles. Another really important thing is to stay within your scope of practice as a coach at all times. So, if there is a question from a client regarding changing snack options, then it's really important that you discuss that with the dietitian before you go ahead and say, oh, well, why don't you have this or why don't you have that? So it's just important to really, really keep clear on what your role as a coach is and what the psychologist's role is, what the dietitian's role is, and keep within those parameters. And for me, I think that another really important part is keeping regular contact with that treatment team, regular updates of any pertinent information that's come up in sessions with clients or text messages or things that have happened around meals, so that that team is really aware of what's happening outside of their sessions, because some of the most valuable stuff in recovery and things that happen that then can be worked on those next sessions happens when we're with clients or outside of that time when those clients are messaging us. And as a coach, we get all this really valuable information that should be communicated to the treatment team so that they can help that client in session work through it.
So make the first contact. I usually contact the treatment team in most cases within at least 1 to 2 sessions of seeing the client. I usually will try to not overwhelm the client and start with the dietitian. So I'll usually talk to the dietitian first, or if there isn't a dietitian, the psychologist, obviously. But I start with one treatment team member, and rather than trying to make contact with everyone at first, just starting with one person and letting them know who you are. It's really important to do that right from the beginning. One thing that's also really important is to explain what coaching is and put it up on the table as soon as you start. Say, I know that you might have some questions or some concerns, and so I understand that, and I'm here and I'm willing to answer any questions that you have about coaching, and explain it really well, and let them know that you are there to support their treatment goals for their clients. So you're not there to provide any treatment, you're there to help them and their client with the practical side of recovery. I always use the example of a meal plan. You have a meal plan that you provide your client. When they leave the office, sometimes it can be difficult to implement that in the moment. So my role is going to be helping the client to do those more practical things. and to be there for them. So yeah, make sure that you're really clear with the treatment team about what your role is, and ask them about the frequency that you would like, that they would like you to be in contact with them, and what the best method is for them. So let them know that they're really important, and they'll work with you much more seamlessly. So you have found to communicate with the client's treatment team, usually just an email to start, to make the connection, to, as I said before, within the first week, within the first couple of sessions of seeing your new client, making contact via email, introducing yourself, and from then organising a time to speak over the phone, and a 10-minute call to start with is totally fine. And again, as I mentioned before, just making sure that you're really clear about what your role is and helping them to implement their treatment goals, and how you'll be helping their client, and letting them know that they're providing the treatment, and you're providing the support and the guidance, and also some skills. So yeah, via email and via phone, I'd say that are the best ways.
Let me see. How do I connect with the treatment team? So I kind of answered this before. Depends on the person. So like sometimes you don't have a receptive therapist. If that's the case, then I will email them. Sometimes I'll only email them like once every 2 weeks. If it's someone that's really busy, I'll just write. Or honestly, if there's nothing going on that really needs their attention and they don't really check, then I'll just do it, like I said, once every 2 weeks. I won't do it after every session. Unless it's something that's like needs to be addressed. And I've had to call therapists before because I was, for like possible self-harming or suicides and things like that. So Carolyn was really good about that, and basically telling me like your job in that situation is to call the therapist. So I have done that. But in a normal situation, like I said, I just try to type up notes about what's going on. Some dietitians prefer to just talk on the phone. So yeah, it just depends. Some of them I text. It just depends on the person.
Great. So reach out to the members of the treatment team. If the client's been working with the team for a while, this is an extra great resource for you. Get as much information as possible. A lot of clients I've worked with tend to split, or they'll paint something one way when it's kind of another. So the team is a resource for you, and will have lots of hopefully helpful insight. And really important, if the team isn't familiar with recovery coaches, talking about what your role is, and I always come at it from the angle of making it super positive, which I mean it is, but for anything that can be unknown, sometimes it's like scarier. What is this person doing? They're going to try to take my job, whatever. But I explain that my role is to make their job easier. So any goals that they've set up for their client that they're having a hard time executing, especially the real life in the moment application of the goal, I'm there to assist with. And every treatment member I've talked to that has been unfamiliar with recovery coaches, and then I introduce them to it, they're so stoked and excited and see the value in it, and are really happy to work with me and to have me on. So that's great. Also, if their therapist and dietitian, hopefully they specialize in eating disorders, make sure you tell them that you went through Carolyn Costin's certification program, because everyone knows Carolyn, and that is like an automatic in gold star. Someone I talked to recently was like, oh, you mean the goddess of eating disorder treatment? And I was like, I feel the exact same way. So yeah, name drop, that'll get you in. And also asking to be put on any treatment planning emails, like if that's the way they communicate, ask how they communicate, ask for their preferred communication, whether it's email or text. There was a kind of big issue with a client recently. I picked up the phone and called the therapist, and most are really receptive to that. But yeah, just establishing that from the get-go. I hope that's some helpful information for you for working with a treatment team. All right, so this question is, what are the best ways you have found to communicate with a client's treatment team? I love group chat, like a text. Some send me the treatment emails, and that's really helpful because you get more like details of the notes. For a live-in, I definitely recommend a group chat because there's things that come up left and right, and like you want quick access to that, or to the other members, especially for tricky situations. And for big issues, I think I said this in another video, like the client who had the herpes diagnosis, I called her therapist just because she had made that comment about like, my life's over, I'm gonna kill myself if I find out I have herpes. So then when she found out she did, like, I just wanted to check with the therapist and make sure everyone is on the same page, and she was being honest with her therapist about it, which she was, so that's great. Therapist handled that one. I just handled the sushi that night, or whatever we ate. Yeah, so this isn't a really long, complicated one. I think that's it.
So the best way to communicate with your team members on a treatment team, whether it's one person or several people, is to really ask their preferred method. As a coach, I have learned to be very flexible in what therapists and dietitians would like, so that I can keep us all on the same page. So a lot of times they like email because they can read it when they have an opportunity. And then if something specific comes up that needs more dialogue, we can schedule a phone conversation. However, everybody's different. While email seems to be, the majority of people's preferences, some do prefer phone. Some prefer text. I actually had one dietitian one time where we would voice memo each other back and forth after a session. So my advice to you as a coach would be just to ask in the very beginning. Let your team members know, or team member know, that you like high communication because you have the most interactions with the client, and you set very specific goals for them and want to relay those. And how would they prefer you communicate? And you'll find that people will definitely tell you what they want, and then you have customized it to them, and it just makes for a smoother just experience for everybody on the team. So my advice would be to be flexible and ask their preferred method. So on every successful team, each team member plays a role. So when you're working on a treatment team, whether it is yourself, a therapist, a dietitian, which is a pretty typical team, or maybe you just have a therapist, you just have a dietitian, sometimes there's a doctor, sometimes there's a psychiatrist. There can definitely be a mix, but it's really embracing the strengths you bring to the table as a coach. So what are those? I mean, typically, right, we're down in the trenches, we're in the action, we have a whole lot more connection with our clients in between sessions. So we typically will have the most intimate type relationship with the client and be the holder of a great deal of information that can help the others on the team. So one really important thing that I can't encourage you enough to do is communicate, communicate, communicate. As a coach, we are the glue to the team. That's often what I have found, of pulling everybody together and making sure everybody is on the same page, and we understand where the client is struggling, things that are coming up in between sessions, and also the goals that you are setting for them moving into the following week or so. It's super important. So also as a coach, because you're the glue and you're communicating, don't worry about if other members on the team don't necessarily do the same or communicate back. Just have a piece about it that you have communicated and you're keeping everybody on the same page. So on your treatment team, remember your strength. You are action goal oriented and you are in the trenches with your clients. So communicate, communicate, communicate. You are the glue.
The tips I've learned for working with the client's treatment team is definitely what I spoke to before about being an adjunct to the team, and also asking how they like to work. Like, I've certainly worked with teams where they're like, we don't communicate at all unless there's something really kind of big or noteworthy, and then we'll send you an email. And I'm like, okay. Other teams are really happy for me to send updates every time I see the client, but then I'll notice that they never send me updates, and that's just something, okay. And some teams work back and forth. We're constantly firing emails. And so I think my hot tips working with the treatment team is find out what they like, find out what their rhythm is, check in. Hey, you know, it's been 3 or 4 weeks now. I just want to see how things are going from your end. What am I doing that's working? Is there anything you want me to shift? How's the communication going? And 99.9% of the time, people are like, yeah, it's all great. It's fantastic. Another thing is that I just keep emails brief because, you know, now that I have a full practice, it's very easy to wake up in the morning and I have 45 emails in my inbox and I'm like, ugh. So, you know, paragraph, nice and short, unless of course there's more to say. But I think setting yourself good habits early on, what I found when I first started working with clients is my notes were long and I was spending more time writing notes than I was seeing clients. And I was like, hang on, this doesn't feel right. So learn how to take notes that work for you in your style, but that are also readable for someone else. And I think a really great way to test that is to come back to a note that you might have written a week later, like with a fresh mind, and just be like, oh, if I was somebody else's team member reading this note, does it make sense? Does it give me the key points of the session? Sometimes I find just looking at the homework can also sometimes be the juice of the session, because that's okay, what are they working on? What are their goals? So sometimes for me, that's the easiest way to write notes, is to center it around the homework, because that's what's going to be front and foremost when they next come to session.
Hi. Regarding communicating with a client's treatment team, I've either done, a lot of the times I've just done phone calls, because we know that, you know, with Signal calling, and I don't want to get into anything specific over email just for security reasons. Even if it's, you know, HIPAA compliant, I just feel like so many things can be lost in translation if you are not actually speaking to the person on the other end. And I don't want that to happen. So a lot of times, just so I'm clear on the treatment team's goals and how I can help the client get there, or if I'm struggling with a client and they really don't seem to be as engaged with the process as they should be, or that, you know, their family or their team thinks they should be, then, you know, it's easier to have that conversation over the phone than it is through email or texting, I find. So I prefer to speak to them on the phone.